How many movies or TV shows have you seen where there's a small town law enforcement officer that is corrupt? Or how many real true crime stories have you heard about small town law enforcement that has some element of corruption involved with it? In today's case, we have an officer that is assigned to be the lead investigator for a missing persons investigation, an investigation that should have never, ever been handed to him. It's time to turn on the searchlight for Rachel Good. Welcome back to Brain Scratch Searchlight. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here today and for caring about these cases like I do. Let's go ahead and dive into the details starting at NamUs. This is the profile for Rachel Nicole Good, a white Caucasian female missing from Elkton, Virginia. Date of last contact, October 18th, 2003. It has been a very long time, and of course we have very big cause for concern in that with some of the other details we're going to hear today, you guys are going to see we have a lot to be concerned about with this case. She went missing at the age of 20. If she's currently alive, she would be 38 years old. She stands at 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighs around 180 pounds. We believe she was also pregnant at the time that she disappeared. Let's see what we have here for information on the disappearance. Good was last seen with friends in the parking lot behind the Elkton Volunteer Fire Department near the coin laundry off Spotswood Trail in Elkton, Virginia at approximately 6 p.m. on October 18th, 2003. Some of the news reports that I'm seeing push that time frame around, but it's somewhere between 6 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. that she's last seen at that location. Her friends saw her get into her Dodge Neon and drive away as it got dark. She's never been heard from again. Her Dodge Neon would be found at her home, but no signs of where she is. For hair color, blonde or strawberry blonde. For left eye and right eye, we get brown, but it's also noting in the eye description that in some other descriptions, they're saying that her eyes are blue. So you might see some varying information on that. For scars or marks, a scar on her navel, a scar on her back, and a scar on her abdomen. For clothing, she was wearing a yellow t-shirt and blue jeans. It also notes that she had stud earrings. I don't know why this is coming up on footwear. Additional case information, none entered. We've got one picture of her here. Honestly, it's a pretty bare bones profile. I've never quite seen this before. The investigating agencies, this isn't even completely filled out. If I wanted to do an entry on this case today, I couldn't even get this case entered having such little information on the investigating agency. But it is interesting to note the agency is actually the Virginia State Police, not the local police department. Of course, that's going to tie into some of those concerns that we started today's video with. But let's go ahead and learn a little bit about Elkton, Virginia. Elkton was formerly named Conrad's Store. It's an incorporated town in Rockingham County, Virginia. The population was 2,762 at the 2010 census. Obviously, we're talking small town here. It's located along the South Fork of the Shenandoah River at the intersections of East-West U.S. Route 33 and North-South U.S. Route 340. Something else interesting about it, the general area is agricultural, filled with farmlands and rural scenes. Of course, probably a beautiful place to live and to have that type of view. But in terms of a missing persons case, it's just a huge question of where do you search? And honestly, for this case, I haven't run into any articles that say there even was any type of search conducted. I have to imagine that there was some form of searches conducted, but this is a bizarre case in that we have her last seen at a location with her friends behind the volunteer fire department, or actually, from what I understand, in the parking lot of the volunteer fire department. Her car is found at home. So where would you necessarily search outside of having tips called in saying, hey, you need to look in this particular area? There's nothing to really lead us in any particular direction here. Just to give you a little view of where she was last seen, this is the Elkton Fire Department. I haven't found information on what her home address is, so I'm not sure how close she lived to this. Kind of raises a question about why are you going to hang out with your friends there in particular? I don't know if maybe she had some friends that were volunteer firefighters. Maybe they were on shift at that point. I mean, the only thing that I've seen described, and of course, we're looking at historical information here. There's a coin laundry and there's the volunteer fire department. Even as it looks right now, I can't even see the building that was the coin laundry. Maybe it's this building that's now contractor services, but I'm also seeing this lot that looks like it's been demolished here. This might have been the coin laundry. Now there's a little Ford dealership here. Why are you going to hang out in this area in particular? I don't know, but that's the information that we have. Let's go ahead and press forward. Over at the Charlie Project, get some additional details. Police are interested in speaking to the driver of a red truck seen near Good's home at about noon on October 18th, the day after her disappearance. The driver has not been identified and is not being called a suspect in her case. This is one of the only places where I see this note about the red truck come up. We don't have any other detail. And of course, we're talking back in 2003, so I know that's a very tough lead to follow. Authorities do not believe Good left Elkton of her own volition. They believe she was murdered. But little evidence is available in her case, and investigators do not believe they can prosecute anyone until Good's body is found. She's a graduate of Fort Defiance High School and left behind 3 children when she vanished. Her case remains unsolved. Yes, mother of 3 at the age of 20, very likely pregnant with her 4th child at that time. Continuing at a website called Behind the Blue Wall, which obviously I think you would understand the trend of articles they bring up here. We are talking about kind of police corruption related information. They did grab some articles, and this story's falling in this weird time period. The early 2000s, like we had the internet, we had news websites and all that, but for some reason, a whole bunch of the articles, probably because of the location, probably because this is a small town area, a lot of these articles are just disappearing. And thankfully, there was a few smart people, someone that posted here at behindthebluewall.blogspot.com. They grabbed just the entire article and pasted it in here. We also had a few people over at Tapatalk do the same thing, kind of grabbed the articles and pasted them in there. If they didn't do that, honestly, these articles would be completely lost. These details would be completely lost at this point. So I'm thankful to them for doing it. These are articles that you can't find on archive.org. You can't find them at newspapers.com. And this information is important. This is still an active open case. So this was originally published in the Daily News Record. It's an article by David Reynolds, and it was published on October 18th, 2007, so several years after the actual disappearance, but very important detail here. When Brenda Brown reported her daughter's disappearance to the Elkton Police Department back in 2003, she says, "The officer who took her statement couldn't stop shaking. I've never seen anyone shake like that," Brown said. He could barely hold his ink pen in his hand, and he only wrote a couple of lines. After the interview, Brown remembers the young Elkton officer, Adam Williams, offered to help however he could and told Brown that if she needed anything, she should call him. He would take care of it. When she looks back on it 4 years later, Brown says that she felt right away that something was wrong. Now, Officer Adam Williams, only 22 years old in 2003, a very young officer at that point, he would become the officer that this case gets assigned to. He's the lead on this missing persons investigation for a period of time. Continuing over at WashingtonTimes.com, the then 22-year-old Williams handled the first 4 days of the investigation as Elkton Police Department's lead investigator. During that time, family members said he entered Good's apartment and collected evidence. You would expect that for a lead investigator. Good's parents soon found letters between Williams and Good that suggested a romantic relationship. Then Police Chief Richard Pullen said that he had no official knowledge of a relationship. Of course, this relationship takes on a little bit of a different light when you talk about the fact that she's pregnant. We believe that she's about 10 weeks pregnant at this time. Is he the father? Maybe that's a big deal. Maybe it isn't. Probably a bigger deal considering the fact that he is also married at this time, married to someone else. Let's Let's go ahead and continue with the details here. VSP took over the case 10 days after she disappeared. Basically, the local police said, will you take this, state police? Will you take this case? I think when they figured out something really bad happened in terms of how this case was handled, they knew they had to hand it up to the state police level. It looks like that's where it sits still to this day. As a matter of fact, the tip line that's on the screen right now is for Virginia State Police. Family members have said that Williams tried to get Good to terminate her pregnancy, and she threatened to tell his wife. I'm seeing a little variation on that story. I think it's information that's also coming from the family, where they say that there was a possibility that he might have actually given her money to terminate the pregnancy. She didn't use it for that. Maybe that's another motive in terms of him being upset with her. Williams entered a letter of resignation to the Elkton Department in November of 2003, and it was effective January of 2004, shortly after state police searched his home. So we have something go really wrong in this investigation right from the start. 4 days that this officer had, if he is involved, 4 days where he had access to her home specifically, removed things from the home, could have been covering up his trail in all kinds of other ways. And someone, even at 22 years old, I would have to think that had some level of training for investigations of this nature. Like, this is a nightmare on every level. And then you have the police chief that says, no, we didn't know that there was any relationship here. The bigger question is, why would Williams accept the assignment? Why wouldn't Officer Williams say, this case should not be assigned to me? I know this person. I deal with this. I mean, in a small town like that, everyone's almost going to know everyone else. And especially law enforcement, they're going to know a lot of the people in the town. I get that. I think he still could have had a conversation with his police chief as to, hey, look, there's a relationship that's there. I don't want this information to go public. Can we just get this assigned to someone else? I think it probably would have happened. Why didn't he do that? It is a huge question, and it's a huge question that stands to this very day. On August 23rd, 2004, the Richmond Times-Dispatch published this article, and it essentially calls out Adam Williams. The Daily News Record of Harrisonburg quoted a source close to the investigation as confirming that former Elkton officer Adam Williams is a suspect in the disappearance of Rachel Good. Members of Good's family say investigators told them Williams is the suspect. For months, the family has asserted that Williams, who is married, was dating Good before she disappeared. At a news conference Friday, Commonwealth's attorney Marcia Garst announced that the search for the Elkton woman has been upgraded to a homicide investigation, although her body has not been found. She also said that the suspect is being monitored and would be a fool to flee the area. Despite a warning like that, he actually does wind up not just cutting out of town, cutting out of the state. The News Record tried to reach out to him, could not reach him for comment. Another interesting point brought up here by her brother, Adam Good. He says they were calling each other every day leading up to the disappearance. Then, after the disappearance, he never tried to call her cell phone again. Very big piece of information there. First of all, it sounds like the family was in custody of her cell phone. I would think that for Adam to come to that conclusion that someone in the family actually had that phone, had it on, and kept it charged. But we've also got a cell phone here. 20-year-old, I'm pretty sure would have taken it with her. I'm curious to know, is there ping information that could at least show her movements in some, they might not have the best of GPS information for back in 2003. They certainly have cell tower information. So with that, could they at least track some movements and say, okay, it seems like she was in this area. There's also a question of, could they track his movements? I'm sure he has a phone as well. And even if you don't have GPS level information, there's a triangulation that happens with ping towers. They kind of figure out which one's the closest one for it to handle the service. I don't know if that triangulation information can help drill it down to something reasonable where they could say, based on the data we have, we can tell that He was in the same city block as she was at this particular time. I don't know if they could get it down that fine. Nowadays, considering how our GPSs work in our phone, that phone information could be critical to a case like this, could literally show, yes, they were together. He went over to her house after she left the volunteer police fire department. He was at her house for 2 hours. Her phone stayed, his phone left. Like, that could be really, really compelling information, even for a case where you don't have a body, a no body homicide prosecution. I think for 2003, they probably don't have that level of detail, which certainly makes this a tough case to prosecute. In September of 2004, we can see that they actually get a grand jury together to hear information about this case. They must have some type of compelling evidence. I mean, look, we've got that big question that we've already talked about. You have a guy that's assigned to this case, should have immediately told someone this case should not be dropped on me. We need to move this to someone else. He didn't. He took 4 days. Honestly, I want to know the trigger of what happened in that 4th day. Did he come forward and say, oh, by the way, this is someone I'm involved with? Did the family go and complain to the police? And that's kind of what nudged things forward. That's probably what happened. It's kind of hard, but based on the information I'm hearing, some of the family knew that she was dating someone that was in law enforcement. But the way some of these articles are written, it's saying that basically they found some letters that confirmed it. Maybe they didn't know it was him in particular. I think that confirmation is likely what pushed this thing to that next step. But they pull a grand jury together, and from what I understand, this grand jury reconvenes on this same case time and time again. So there is an investigation happening. We know that the Rockingham County Commonwealth's attorney, Marcia Garst, is part of this. She's probably trying to push forward and see if they can get to a point where they can get an indictment so they can go ahead and prosecute this case. Obviously, it hasn't happened. Just a little over a year after her disappearance, basically her family processes this like she is gone. There's an obituary that's actually filed for her, even though she's not legally declared dead. That wouldn't happen until 2010. We're talking about 6 years after this. But there is an obituary. They do have a service. I just want to take a moment and point out some other things that they say about her here. She enjoyed outdoor activities, family activities, and she never knew a stranger. She was a good mother, enjoyed people, and was a free spirit. As a matter of fact, they also mention the names of her children here. From what I understand, her mother does wind up raising one of those children. I'm not sure of the other one. Possibly different fathers involved there, so maybe the other two, actually. It's 2 boys and a girl. So it could be that the other 2 are living with their father. They also note that memorial contributions can be made to parents of murdered children. That's an organization that we've talked about on the channel here a few times. I first learned about them through the Elisa Gomez case. Really wonderful organization that looks to help these parents in terms of processing this. They've got support services, but they also have a whole other aspect. They call it SOS, Second Opinion Services, where for a certain donation, I believe, they will go ahead and re-review the case. They'll have another independent investigator look at it and then give their opinion in terms of what's happening with that case. Should the case still, should it be reinvestigated? Should it be reopened? We actually had an interview with them on season 2 of 3 Men and a Mystery. You might want to check out for more information, but really, really good organization. Here's a photo of Rachel's mother, stepfather, and one of her sons, Mason, at the memorial service for her. Let's go ahead and look at some more articles on this. This one originally posted at WHSV.com back in 2008. As of now, it has disappeared, but thanks to someone at Topatalk, thank you, Burns Jail 2003, we've got a copy of it. It will have been 5 years since an Elkton woman, Rachel Good, went missing. Her family is asking people in the community with information about the case to come forward. Police say they believe that she's dead. They say there is a suspect in the case, but they're not saying who it is. I find that interesting because at this point, his name has already been attached to this case pretty strongly in the media. Quote, "We know for a fact that there's people out there that know something," says her mother, Brenda Brown, "but they won't come forward. Either they just don't want to get involved or because they're afraid. They're literally afraid because of it being a murder. I think she makes a really strong point there to think about what's already gone wrong with this case in terms of how it was handled. But to know we're also talking about this case 18, 19 years later, her body still hasn't been found. This is like one of the most terrifying thoughts I can come up with. We have someone trained in trying to solve these cases. They know all the different ways that these things can be handled that makes it tough for them to do their job. Did he flip that around and use those mechanisms to protect himself? Like, that's just a really terrifying thought for me personally. Brown and her husband Mike are raising a grandson, Mason, who was 5 months old when Good disappeared. He's what's holding us together, says Brenda Brown. He's our baby. Brenda says she just wants to have a final memorial service for Rachel. However, she says that she still doesn't think it will bring closure. It's never closure to murder, she says. I've talked to many other women and men that have had their children murdered. There's no such thing as closure to a murder. There's always questions. It's not like a regular death. I've certainly heard that from many of the families that we've dealt with as well. Another article saved. Thank you, Tater Tot. This one originally posted in 2010. Also at WHSV. Rachel Good's mother, Brenda Brown, says she's still confident that Commonwealth's attorney, Marcia Garst, will find new details in the investigation that has gone on for the last 7 years. Brown has raised one of her daughter's children, who is now 7 years old. She says the child and his older brother are getting to the age where they ask about their mother. One of the boys released a balloon in her honor on her birthday this year. She says that she also stays in frequent contact with Garst about the investigation. Really, they're just doing everything they can to keep hope alive in this case, that they're going to see it actually come to some type of trial. And maybe it will, but not necessarily in a criminal prosecution. Here at newsleader.com from February 2014, the town of Elkton is asking a judge to dismiss a wrongful death lawsuit filed by the estate of a woman who disappeared in 2003. The estate of Rachel Good and Good's father, Kerry Good, filed the $5 million lawsuit in October of 2012 after a judge declared Rachel Good dead back in 2010. The defendants are the Elkton Police Department, former police chief Richard Pullen, and former police officer Adam Williams. This is how these civil suits go. And initially, for them to kind of shoot wide and try to get everyone that they can involved, I think in some cases is usually a mechanism so that they can actually question some of those people. Based on some of the comments that I've seen from the family, I believe they think that Police Chief Richard Pullen may have actually known that Adam Williams was involved with Rachel Good. So I'm not surprised to have his name in there. And then, of course, throwing the police department in there. I almost feel that that's appropriate for a civil trial with a case of this nature. We've got a department that did not process things correctly. Civil trial set as of May 26, 2016. After 13 years of unanswered questions, Rachel Good's family might get some answers starting today, or at least some symbolic justice. Barring a postponement, hint, hint, it's going to be postponed several times. A civil trial against former Elkton police officer Adam Williams, the prime suspect in Good's October 2003 disappearance, is set to begin. I'm hoping we can get some kind of answers, said Good's mother, Brenda Brown. I just want to know the truth. I don't think that's too much to ask. Williams has been the only suspect in the case and the focus of the investigation. A special grand jury continues to investigate, and Virginia State Police remains the lead investigative agency. Williams, who resigned from the Elkton Police Department in 2004, moved out of state. Recent court records show he is a current resident of Walker, Louisiana. A judge declared Good dead in 2010, opening the door for the lawsuit to be filed. Williams, who has not hired an attorney, and keep in mind, this is a few years. The initial civil trial was launched in 2012. It's now 2016. Williams, not with an attorney. Of course, he couldn't be reached for comment as well. He filed last-minute motions to dismiss or continue the case, he claims that the statute of limitations has expired, which the attorney for the family, Pollock, disputes. If it's not dismissed, Williams is asking for a 60-day continuance because he's recovering from injuries sustained in a traffic crash and hypertension. Williams has not appeared for any of the case's hearings. He also claims he recently received information that an inmate in a Virginia prison might have information that would help his defense. He's asking the court for time to discuss the information with the inmate. Is it just me, or do you guys get the feeling that he's just really not threatened by any of this? I don't know. September 16th, 2016, the case does get postponed again, but not because of Williams. Brad Pollock, the attorney representing the family, filed a petition to continue the case on a later date. The reason for this petition was a dispute that he's having with the Virginia State Police over cell phone records from Rachel Good and Adam Williams, which are critical to the plaintiff's case. The original cell phone records have been destroyed by the cell phone service providers, but Virginia State Police have copies of the phone records obtained as part of a subpoena years ago. Virginia State Police filed a motion to quash that subpoena, which would effectively prevent Rachel Good's family from ever gaining access to the phone records they believe to be critical to this case. So, interesting to hear, we do have phone records here. Like I said, I don't know if the location information is going to be as helpful as we would expect for nowadays, but there might be other information in those records. The call history might be helpful. If what Adam said in the previous article is true, that Williams never tried to call her phone again, that would certainly be proven by those records. WHSV spoke with Good's father outside the courthouse. Quote, Adam Williams and his father is guilty as hell. Excuse my language. And he can run, but he can only run for so long. I've got the best lawyer in 10 counties, and we're going to get him, says Kerry Good. Why he's bringing in his father, I don't exactly know at this point, but we're going to see some other comments from him by the end of this video that might explain that. Just a few weeks after that postponement, with the lawyer trying to fight for the phone records, we see this wrongful death lawsuit pulled. An attorney for Rachel Good's estate scrapped a civil trial scheduled for today and dismissed the case after a dispute with the Virginia State Police over those phone records. They are not going to be able to get the phone records for the family. Production of the information sought by plaintiff will require the disclosure of the contents of confidential files related to a criminal investigation, said Assistant Attorney General Philip Figueroa in the motion on behalf of the state police. A comparison of call logs of the two phone numbers could provide a key link between the pair before her disappearance, he said. The records could show how long they knew each other before she went missing. So it sounds like he's really looking at that connectivity angle, not so much the kind of location angle. Pollock withdrew the lawsuit and has 6 months to refile, which he said he plans on doing. He does wind up refiling. And 2017, trial set. Are we actually going to get to go this time? The wrongful death lawsuit against former Elton police officer Adam Williams seeks roughly $50,000. So obviously the amount has been changed, and it's only against Adam Williams at this point. The police chief, the police department have been removed from this version of the suit. Pollock is still fighting to gain access to that phone evidence. He says they aren't using it, but they have a policy not to share it when they have an active investigation. Man, the back and forth, this is like the world's worst arm wrestling match. It's being delayed on this side. It's being delayed on that side. They have some key information that you think would be extremely helpful for a civil trial of this nature. You'd think with how law enforcement handled this case and kind of screwed up those first 4 days in the beginning, they might be a little more helpful to this family and say, okay, we'll turn those records over, especially considering that there's a really good chance that other information that could have helped this case was damaged in those 4 days. But we're not seeing that. After dodging court for 6 years, former Elkton police officer Adam Williams plans to appear in Rockingham County Circuit Court next month for a pretrial hearing to determine whether he filed a request to dismiss the case too late. Judge T.J. Wilson asked Williams' attorney, thankfully he finally has an attorney at this point, Braxton Perrier of Madison, if Williams was willing to appear in court. Wilson said he wants Williams to explain why he was late. I think I'd like that, the judge said. We'll have him here to give us that testimony. Puryear said Williams would indeed appear. Williams was served with the lawsuit on April 24th. I think this is the new version of the lawsuit. By state statute, he had 21 days to respond, which would have been on May 15th. Instead, it was filed on May 16th. Circuit Court Judge T.J. Wilson plans to hear arguments from Adam Williams on why the case should be dismissed. It's unclear, however, if Williams, who now lives in Louisiana, plans to appear in court. So we're hearing he is, we're hearing he's not, we're hearing the trial's going, we're hearing it's not. The plaintiff's attorney, Brad Pollock, could ask Wilson to enter a default judgment if Williams basically doesn't show up, which would just have the judge say, okay, yeah, we're finding him guilty. And basically, a big point in this whole civil trial is to get that guy on a stand, to be able to ask him questions. That's really their focus here. And it seems like he knows that, and he's just doing everything he can to avoid that particular situation. It's unbelievable. Williams, who couldn't be reached for comment for this story, has not appeared for any hearing since the initial complaint was filed in 2012. Man. So he would wind up showing up. He does testify about his late filing. He says that he tried to submit the filing online on May 15th, 2017, and basically that got kicked back. The staff said, you cannot file it in this manner. I've seen some clarification from them on a different news post on this case that was done over on Facebook, and they're saying they actually do accept things electronically, just not the way that he was trying to send it in. They must have some type of particular website that you have to go to upload this stuff, and he was just trying to email it in, I believe. So what Williams did was he actually sent the stuff to a relative of his that lives in that county still, and then he had them walk it into the courthouse. But of course, that didn't happen until the following day. I made every attempt to file in the 21-day window, said Williams, who was clad in a black shirt, black pants, and black shoes, and emotionless on the stand. Williams said he waited to file because he was trying to hire an attorney. You know, he hasn't had since 2012 to figure that out. Wilson rejected Williams's argument. When a party or attorney waits until the very last day of the pleading window, he or she just does not give themselves any margin for error. In effect, we have what amounts to his own negligence. So Williams was arguing that basically this was beyond the statute of limitations, which there's been active trials in progress since the original statute of limitations. So that didn't really get to expire like it would if there wasn't trials active. So that excuse doesn't hold up. He also says that basically the filing of the civil trial doesn't really say what the charge is, but it's implied because it's a wrongful death suit. The implication is murder, at least according to Attorney Pollock. Because Williams is now in default, he forfeits the right to argue the case in court. So despite the fact that he essentially loses, that this trial goes forward, he also, I have to believe this was intentional, he intentionally loses the right to argue the case. He still doesn't have to take the stand. Pollock said a default judgment also amounts to a legal admission of liability. Pollock said the family won't have a chance to argue that Williams killed Good unless he faces criminal charges, which is tough for them to swallow. I was hoping to use this process to possibly prove in a courtroom that he did it, Pollock said after the hearing. I wanted a trial, and all we're going to get is a hearing on the damages. Now, I looked everywhere. I can't find any information on the hearing for the damages. I would bet with how this all went, it's likely that the $50,000 was awarded, and it's likely that the family will never be able to collect on any of that. This guy doesn't even live in the state anymore. But I can't find an official word on what the actual outcome of that was. I'm telling you, it wasn't the point of the trial. The point of the trial was to get him to answer some hard questions, was to get him on the stand. And effectively, the closest they got was a judge that really pinned him on, hey, you don't know how to handle this process, and it seems like you really don't care about anything that's going on here. And effectively, his response is, yeah, okay. How can you not feel for the family in this case? I don't know. Here's some more information over at the Winchester Star. Carrie Good isn't interested in civil or criminal resolutions to the disappearance. All I want to know is where she's at, the 68-year-old said. That's all I want, so I can bring her home. I'm tired. It's been 15 years, and my health ain't that good, and I want to know what happened to my daughter before I die. If you find out Adam Williams done it and you electrocute him, it ain't going to bring my daughter back, Carrie Good said. I just want the truth. Williams, who now lives in Louisiana, has never been criminally charged in the case, but a special grand jury has convened off and on since 2004. This article is written in 2018. If it had not been for me hiring a lawyer and pushing this thing, we'd be back at the start, Carrie Good said. Unless Williams faces criminal charges, any role that he may have played in the disappearance will never be argued in an open court. Commonwealth's attorney Marcia Garth said that the case is still an active investigation. She said state police is the lead agency and that the special grand jury is still active, but she wouldn't comment further on the case. Good is frustrated that it hasn't moved forward. Garst's office has given up, he says. That's the way I feel. They're doing nothing. They've took my daughter's life and what happened to her and put it up on the shelf. If Williams was involved, Carrie Good said that he can actually forgive him. I'm not mad at Williams, not a bit. They were kids. They screwed up. If he got down on his knees and said, Lord, I've messed up. Please forgive me. I'm obligated to forgive him. The next step in the civil suit is a hearing on the amount of damages that would be awarded. I told you guys I can't find anything official on that. Per Virginia law, any money would likely go to Rachel Good's children. Carrie Good said he doesn't expect that the family will receive anything. I don't want nothing. I don't want a penny, he said. I want my grandkids to know what happened to their mother. That's all I want. Very hard not to look at this case and think things are pointing very strongly in one particular direction. But we've heard some things along the way that I'm still curious about. What was this reference to Williams's father? Thankfully, I did find one more article. This is a journalist named Chris Slater who was actually sent out to possibly cover this story, and he interviewed Carrie Good. Basically, when he got back to the offices he was working at, they decided that they weren't going to cover it. Seems like it kind of bothered Chris, and at some point he wound up writing about it here at ordinarytimes.com. So we get a little more insight into what's going on with Carrie, what he thinks has happened around this, and some of the other things that the family experienced with this. This interview is actually from 2015, so we got to rewind the clock just a little bit. There's a lot of stuff going on. I've heard we have enough on this guy to hang him, but they're afraid to try it without a body. I'm really kind of flabbergasted at that, especially, it seems, over the past 10, 15 years. No body homicide prosecutions are happening. And we've seen some particular instances here on the channel where they've won with a no body prosecution. So I wanted to try to find some more information on this. I ran into this article over at aetv.com on the true crime blog. No corpse, no problem. Although murder charges without a corpse are rare nationally, about 86% of no-body murder cases that go to trial result in convictions. That's actually higher than all murder cases that have a conviction rate of around 70%. They have a quote here from Megan Doyle. She's a prosecutor familiar with those types of cases. Without a body, you need to make sure all your other evidence is overwhelming. Most no-body murder cases that go to trial are based on lengthy investigations and an abundance of strong evidence. Let me just ask you guys a question. If they could show phone records that prove there was a relationship between these two, and if they could get the police chief to sit on a chair and say, yes, we did assign this to him, and he processed that case for 4 days, and they could get family of hers to support, we know that he entered her house several times, would you guys vote for a guilty verdict? And I know that's a really strong simplification, but those points are so strong in my mind. How did he not pull himself out of that investigation right from minute one? And why? That question is just too big to ignore. Carrie Good also talked about his daughter. It says here, Carrie paints a confusing picture of his daughter toward the end. He believed her to be getting her life back on track, but also notes that she was asking him for money. In October 2003 evening, she called and asked to borrow $100. He said, I told her I'd give it to you and you won't have to pay me back. But that $100 came with a small catch. He said, now listen, if you ain't in church on Sunday, don't ask me for no more money. She showed up at church on that Sunday, October 12th. It was the last time that Carrie ever saw his daughter. During their final meeting, Carrie and Rachel talked about the new man in her life. She said, Daddy, I'm dating a policeman. You want to hear him? She pulled her phone out, and I heard his voice on a voicemail. Rachel, how you doing? Just wanted to say hey. The man on that voicemail was Adam Williams. Carrie thinks that they had been dating for 3 or 4 months at the time of her disappearance. And this author also struggling with the big question that we're all wrestling with at this point. It's such a clear conflict of interest. And it would be one thing if Adam's superiors weren't aware of the relationship, but why had he not said anything? Why did he not alert them to the fact that he was romantically involved with this woman? The speculation, of course, is that he used those 4 days to cover up his tracks. Carrie describes his phone call. He actually spoke to Adam a couple of weeks after Rachel's disappearance. He asked to meet up at a McDonald's to talk about the case. Officer Williams said okay, but he never showed up. Of what's happening more currently, Carrie says that we get leads all the time. We heard that she's in a well in Lake Arrowhead. They went down and found the well, and it's been covered up for 2 or 3 years. It would cost astronomical amounts of money to dig it up so we could find the body. When he was asked what the dollar figure is, he's saying somewhere in the $10,000 to $12,000 range. And Carrie says, I ain't got that kind of money. And then we have this theory. The other theory involves Adam's father, who lives in Florida. News of the affair coming to light could have been a motive. I don't think Adam's wife knew what was going on, Carrie said. Rachel may have threatened, I'm going to tell your wife, I'm going to tell everybody. So Adam called his father and hashed it out, is what Carrie is saying here. Carrie called Adam's parents in Florida and spoke on the phone with his mother. She told him that Adam's father would usually make a trip to Virginia in April or May, but for some reason, in 2003, he made the trip in October, the same time that Rachel disappeared. All Carrie knows for sure is that he knows nothing for sure. We've had so many leads and then it all just goes and dies in a corner. I don't have the money to do all this. I wish I did. He does realize that these things take time. He says, quote, I would rather take 25 years and get him than try to take him in 10 and mess up. And this is where we end up. The case of Rachel Good broken up into all these little pieces sprinkled across the internet. Several children that don't know their mother, and very likely a murderer that is still living free while a family has been mourning for the past 18 years. Is there something that someone can do to help this case? I really hope so, and I hope that we can get this video in front of their eyes and tug at their heart and get them to pick up that phone and call it in to the Virginia State Police. If you're that person, the contact information that you need is in the description box down below, or just rewind this video. It was on the screen. Even if you have to be anonymous, whatever you have to do, please get that information in. It has been far too long. This family deserves answers. I'm including a few more links in the description box down below. We're going to have a thread on web sleuths, so you can continue the conversation there if you'd like. There's also a conversation thread on Reddit about this case as well. But I wanted to honor Rachel and really her family's strife in terms of what they've been going through with this case. And considering that they wanted donations to go to parents of murdered children, I think that's what we should do. So on behalf of my amazing supporters, thank you so much to our patrons, people that donate through PayPal. We are making a donation to parents of murdered children just as soon as I'm done filming here today. A big thank you to everyone that supports our work here at the Lord and Arts channel. Quick shout out to new patrons, Michelle Cleland and Kelly. Thank you both so much for joining on Patreon. If you'd like to do the same, please visit lordandarts.com. There you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or buy us a coffee like Mike W. recently did. We always run these presentations with limited commercials. We want you guys to be able to focus on the cases, and we want to be able to keep that focus on helping the families. So we really appreciate all of you out there that support our efforts in terms of doing that. Stay safe, everyone. Take care. We'll see you again here on Monday with a new episode of Case Cracked on the Lord and Arts channel.